let's kick things off for those that aren't familiar with your concept of holistic testing. Can you explain a little bit about what holistic testing is and kind of how it came about? How did you come up with this idea?
So we've been, Lisa and I have been talking about agile testing for 20 years now, but it is to the point where when there's very few people that don't know what agile is. There's a lot of new people coming into it that have never experienced waterfall. So it makes no sense. They don't differentiate between waterfall or agile. It's just, this is how we work. And we're finding that more and more. The other part is that testing activities are ingrained in everything we do. So I think it's more important, especially as they move to DevOps and continuous delivery, to look at testing from a holistic point of view. How does it all fit? How do we get a strategy in place so that we can address that? Maybe you can put up my first slide and I'll talk to that a little bit.
Absolutely. Let's do that.
I did a blog post, and you can find it on janetgregory.ca about holistic testing. And it came about, we were trying to figure out how to think about it. So Dan Ashby has this great post called Continuous Testing. So go and read that. He started talking about, took the traditional DevOps loop and took out the test part of it and said, we test here and here and here, all the way around the DevOps loop. Testing was continuous, it was around. But I looked at that DevOps loop and I thought it doesn't really represent what we do. So I've made a few adjustments, and this is how I think about development, right? So if we look at thinking about, because it's not a horizontal line. It doesn't have a stop or an end most times, never as far as I'm concerned. But we start with a discover, right? We might have a new feature, a new idea. The discovery is kind of where the business people are trying to decide, what do we want to build, or what's the idea? Does it have a return on investment even? And then we start planning, and we can spend more or less time at these different stages, for lack of a better word. We plan, and then the understanding, thinking about what is it we're going to build? How are we going to build it? What are the questions we're asking? So we do this before we ever build it. So building to me is that, how do we code and test and make it happen? We deploy it, we release it to our customers, and then we observe it. Hopefully we learn from it, and then we apply it to the next loop. So it's just this continuous loop of discovery, planning, understanding, and so on. And to me, this speaks better to that instead of the DevOps loop, because test isn't a phase. It happens at all of these different stages. So I've put in little pauses in this because I think we need to reflect. So after each stage, we would say, for example, discovery. Do we really have a business plan for this? Does this actually make sense? Reflect, stop. It's not a gate. It's just, does it make sense? Before you start planning it. The same with planning it. Do we even have the necessary people to be able to do it? Do we have what it takes? Do we have the technical skills? You plan. Pause. Do we have those? Yes or no? Should we move on? And it just goes all the way through. Pause to reflect. Does that make sense to you, Jeff?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. What I like is, taking testing out, as you mentioned, it really emphasizes the testing's not a phase in here. It should be part of all these activities, right?
Yeah. And Elizabeth Hendrickson has a quote that I use a lot. Testing is not a phase, it's an activity that happens throughout.